This is Behind the Curtain IMO. I'm Betsy Jordan. Welcome. So this is a letter that went to President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Dr. Jill Biden. But it was shared on Twitter, or I can't call it X, I'm sorry. We're 45 American physicians, surgeons, and nurses who have volunteered in the Gaza Strip since October 7th, 2023. We've worked with various non-governmental organizations and the World Health Organization and hospitals throughout the Strip. In addition to our medical and surgical expertise, many of us have public health background as well as experience working in humanitarian and conflict zones, including Ukraine during the brutal Russian invasion. Some of us are veterans of the United States Armed Forces. We are a multi-faith and multi-ethnic group. None of us supports the horrors committed on October 7th by Palestinian armed groups and individuals in Israel. The Constitution of the World Health Organization states the health of all peoples is fundamental to the attainment of peace and security and is dependent on the fullest operation of individuals and states. It is in this spirit that we write to you. We are among the only neutral observers who have been permitted to enter the Gaza Strip since October 7. Given our broad expertise and direct experience of working throughout Gaza, we are uniquely positioned to comment on several matters of importance to our government as it decides whether or not to continue supporting Israel's attack on and siege of the Gaza Strip. Now, at no time did I think that President Biden or anyone associated with the administration wanted Israel to take over Gaza. And we cannot control what the leadership in another sovereign nation does. We can't. We can support our allies who are being attacked from the south and the sea, the Red Sea. But what is also true is that we need to stop anything that's against international law. I'll keep going. Specifically, we believe we are well positioned to comment on the massive human toll from Israel's attack on Gaza, especially the toll it has taken on women and children. And I think they also mean innocents. This letter collects and summarizes our own experiences and direct observations in Gaza. We have also provided links to a much longer and heavily cited appendix summarizing the publicly available information from media, humanitarian, and academic sources on key aspects of Israel's invasion of Gaza. That is how they're positioning this in this letter. Understand that other people would position that differently. The appendix is available as a PDF. Okay, and I will get you this PDF file link at the bottom of this video. It's the Gaza doctor's letter. So I'm reading it to you here, but you can access it yourself. This letter and the appendix show probative evidence that the human toll in Gaza is far higher than is being understood in the United States. So let's get this word out. It is likely that the death toll from this conflict is already greater than 92,000 and astonishing 4.2% of Gaza's population. Our government must act immediately to prevent an even worse catastrophe than what has already befallen the people of Gaza and Israel. Now understand, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden have been in favor of a ceasefire and told Netanyahu that Hamas has already been neutralized as much as they're going to be neutralized. This is time to stop. What this is now, it's elevated and escalated into a war against Iran. I understand it, but it needs to stop here as some sort of proxy war. A ceasefire must be imposed on both Israel and Palestinian armed groups by withholding military support for Israel and supporting an international arms embargo on both Israel and all Palestinian armed groups. We believe our government is obligated to do this both under American law and international humanitarian law, and that it's the right thing to do. With only marginal exceptions, everyone in Gaza is sick, injured, or both. This includes every national aid worker, every international volunteer, and probably every Israeli hostage, every man, woman, and child. While working in Gaza, we saw a widespread malnutrition in our patients and our Palestinian healthcare colleagues. Every one of us lost weight rapidly in Gaza despite having privileged access to food and having taken our own supplementary nutrient-dense food with us. We have photographic evidence of life-threatening malnutrition in our patients, especially children, that we are eager to share with you. Virtually every child under the age of 5 whom we encountered both inside and outside of the hospital had both cough and watery diarrhea. We found cases of jaundice, including hepatitis A infection under such conditions, in virtually every room of the hospitals in which we served and in many of our healthcare colleagues in Gaza. An astonishingly high percentage of our surgical incisions became infected from the combination of malnutrition, impossible operating conditions, and lack of supplies, and medications, including antibiotics. The pregnant women we treated often gave birth to underweight infants, and they were unable to breastfeed due to malnutrition. This left their newborns at high risk of death, given the lack of access to potable water anywhere in Gaza. Many of those infants died. In Gaza, we watched malnourished new mothers feed their underweight newborns infant formula made with poisonous water. We can never forget that the world abandoned these innocent women and children. We urge you to realize that epidemics are raging in Gaza. Israel's continued repeated displacement of the malnourished and sick population of Gaza, half of whom are children, in areas with no running water or even toilets available, is absolutely shocking. It is virtually guaranteed to result in widespread death from viral and bacterial, diarrheal diseases and pneumonias, and particularly in children under the age of 5. We worry that unknown thousands have already died from the lethal combination of malnutrition and disease, and that tens of thousands more will die in the coming months. Most of them will be young children. Children are universally considered innocents in armed conflict. However, every single signatory to this letter treated children in Gaza who suffered violence that must have been deliberately directed at them. Specifically, every one of us on a daily basis treated preteen children who were shot in the head and chest. President and Dr. Biden, we wish you could see the nightmares that plague so many of us since we have returned. Dreams of children maimed and mutilated by our weapons, and their inconsolable mothers begging us to save them. We wish you could hear the cries and screams our consciousness will not let us forget. We cannot believe that anyone would continue arming the country that is deliberately killing these children after seeing what we have seen. The pregnant women we treated were particularly malnourished. Those of us who worked with pregnant women regularly saw stillbirths and maternal deaths that were easily preventable in any third world healthcare system. The rate of infection in C-section incisions was astonishing. Women underwent C-section deliveries without anesthesia and were given nothing but Tylenol afterwards because no other pain medications were available. All of us observed emergency departments overwhelmed by patients seeking treatment for chronic medical conditions such as renal failure, hypertension, and diabetes. Aside from trauma patients, most ICU beds were taken up by type 1 diabetics who no longer had access to injected insulin due to the lack of medication and the widespread loss of electricity and refrigeration. Israel has destroyed more than half of Gaza's healthcare resources and has killed 1 out of every 40 healthcare workers in Gaza. At the same time, healthcare needs have increased massively from the lethal combination of military violence, malnutrition, and disease. Understand here that hospitals were deliberately targeted also because Hamas had put installations of their people hidden behind these healthcare facilities. I understand why the decisions were made first off. But now there's an international plea to stop this. We're doing what we can as Americans. And if any of you are watching this or my international friends, please encourage your countries to step in. And there's more that the United States can do regarding not supporting Netanyahu's efforts to continue to try to take over Gaza. This is an international crisis, and it's time for all good men and women to come to the aid of their country and Gaza. As we met our healthcare colleagues in Gaza, it was clear that they were malnourished and both physically and mentally devastated. We quickly learned that our Palestinian healthcare colleagues were among the most traumatized people in Gaza, and perhaps the entire world. Like virtually all people in Gaza, they had lost family members in their homes. Most lived in and around their hospitals with their surviving families in unimaginable conditions. Although they continued working in a grueling schedule, they had not been paid since October 7th. That's last October 7th. This is 2024. That was 2023. All were acutely aware that their work as healthcare providers had marked them as targets for Israel. This makes a mockery of the protected status hospitals and healthcare providers are granted under the oldest and most widely accepted provisions of international humanitarian law. We met healthcare personnel in Gaza who worked at hospitals that had been raided and destroyed by Israel. Many of these colleagues of ours were taken by Israel during the attacks. They all told us a slightly different version of the same story. In captivity, they were barely fed, continuously physically and psychologically abused, and finally dumped naked on the side of a road. Many told us they were subject to mock executions and other forms of mistreatment and torture. Far too many of our healthcare colleagues told us that they were simply waiting to die. We urge you to see that Israel has directly targeted and deliberately devastated Gaza's entire healthcare system, and that Israel has targeted our colleagues in Gaza for death, disappearance, and torture. These unconscionable acts are entirely at odds with American law, American values, and international humanitarian law. I'm almost finished. I realize that this is a very long video. Dr. Biden, you worked with young people throughout your life. We hope and pray that you will not look away from the unspeakable horrors the youth of Gaza face today, horrors only we as Americans can end. We sincerely hope you will do everything in your power to stop what is being done to them. President Biden and Vice President Harris, any solution to this problem must begin with an immediate and permanent ceasefire. We urge you to withhold military, economic, and diplomatic support from the State of Israel and to participate in an international arms embargo of both Israel and all Palestinian armed groups until a permanent ceasefire is established and until good faith negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians lead to a permanent resolution of the conflict. Now, let me tell you this. I am interjecting my own opinion here, but what this should not ever lead someone to believe is that Israelis want continued bombing of Gaza. That is not true. Most of the Israelis want this to stop just as much as anyone else does. We need to stop it. In the meantime, all land crossings between Gaza and Israel, as well as the Rafah crossing, must be open to unfettered aid delivery by recognized international humanitarian organizations. Security screening of aid deliveries must be conducted by an independent international inspection regime. List of forbidden items and with clear, independent international mechanism for challenging forbidden items, as verified by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the occupied Palestinian territory. A bare minimum water allocation of 20 liters of potable water per person per day must be allocated to the population of Gaza as verified by United Nations Water. Full and unrestricted access of medical and surgical professionals and medical and surgical equipment to the Gaza Strip must be allowed. This must include items taken in healthcare professionals' personal luggage to safeguard their proper storage, sterility, and timely delivery, as verified by the World Health Organization. Incredibly, Israel is currently blocking any physician of Palestinian descent from working in Gaza, even American citizens. This makes a mockery of the American ideal that all men are created equal and degrades our nation and our profession. Our work is life-saving. Our Palestinian healthcare colleagues in Gaza are desperate for relief and protection, and they deserve both. We are not politicians. We do not claim to have all the answers. We are simply physicians and nurses who cannot remain silent about what we saw in Gaza. Every day that we continue supplying weapons and munitions to Israel is another day that women are shredded by our bombs and children are murdered with our bullets. And this is signed. Again, I'll put the link at the bottom of the page at the end of this video. This is Behind the Curtain IMO. Thank you for being here.